Chapter 8. Overcoming Opposition. Opposition is the natural environment of life. Remove opposition from a man's surroundings and he shortly withers and dies. A muscle grows strong by exercising it. Calluses protect the hand that daily performs hard work. We grow by meeting obstacles and overcoming them. By this effort and aspiration, we are refined into better persons, into more intelligent and aware beings than we could ever become. When we realize that opposition is important to growth, then we learn to seek it constantly, not in the sense of falsifying it, but rather in looking about to find out where it already exists, and then, by the development of insight and awareness, to overcome it. All opposition is blind because our own eyes are blinded. Once we have seen the truth about opposition, that opposition no longer will be there. Our efforts should not be bent upon breaking down a wall, but upon raising our consciousness so that we are able to perceive methods of egress and ingress. Some people meet opposition enthusiastically and without hostility. Those who do not are either broken by it or eventually turn and run. Hate, hostility and resentment blind our eyes to the sort of things that opposes us. In such a psychological state, we never can see the truth about an obstacle, and its inscrutability eventually will defeat us. All obstacles are not in their truest sense obstacles at all, but merely mental blocks in the mind of the person who perceives them. He overcomes them not by opposing them, but by attempting to understand them. In the end, all obstacles are reduced to one, a false sense of self. To overcome opposition, we must seek first for self-control and enlightenment as to the thing that opposes us. Facing fear. In our modern society, each man is engaged in a constant bout with fear. He must work to provide a living, and the fear is always with him that he will not earn enough for himself and his family. He's usually employed by an industrial colossus in which he is a mere cipher on the payroll, and since he cannot help but perceive his dispensability, insecurity constantly haunts him. He usually lives out his life with his awareness fronted in the ego, and as a consequence, he forever is comparing himself with others. He is either better or worse, but never equal, and so he is either patting himself on the back or berating himself for being inferior. Though fear is not his constant companion, he often fancies he has overcome it because he does not run away. But the fear remains and announces its presence by ulcers, high blood pressure, heart trouble, arthritis, cancer. If we do not want to run away from danger, and if we do not want to be frozen by it, then our only alternative is to fight it, to face it and allow our own particular dynamic to work out the overcoming of it. This involves, above all things, conquering fear. Conquering fear means to subordinate fear, to force it out of the level of awareness, so that the psyche is free to appraise the situation, so that the individual consciousness may penetrate the essence of the situation confronting it and perceive its meaning independent of the ego. When a man does this, he is able to take action against his dangerous situation in such a manner as to reduce its threat to nothing. No matter what the situation that seems to imperil you, you can overcome all. You can act in the midst of them with great bravery, with an otherworldly boldness, if only you will squeeze fear out of your consciousness, recognizing that it proceeds out of the ego and must be surmounted before any obstacle can be overcome. Increasing understanding. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not think that what is hard for thee to master is impossible for man. But if a thing is possible and proper to man, deem it attainable by thee." In order to reduce each obstacle to its proper size, we have to grow. We only meet an obstacle in the first place because of some smallness in our nature, and when we have gotten rid of that smallness, we will have gotten rid of the obstacle too. All obstacles are in actual truth illusions, and to the extent that we are deluded by them is indicated a side of our nature that needs more maturity and understanding. Generally, we only recognize opposition when we fail to pass beyond a certain point with our methods of action. Each of us, as he moves along without opposition, considers that he has evolved a formula that will make his path serene. There is no such formula, and no path will be serene for long. We are all sailors on a stormy sea that appears to be enchanted, but to some higher knowing mind, the deeps are specifically known. Each of us sails this gigantic ocean according to his understanding. Though we all set forth on life's journey with the same potential, present development of that potential is an individual matter, and the opposition that confronts us as we move from hour to hour of our temporal span is directly indicative of our understanding. It is what we cannot do or be or see that comes into our life as a problem. If our problems revolve around love, it is because we cannot love. If our problems revolve around success, it is because we are insecure. If our problem revolve around health, it is because we are spiritually and emotionally repressed. Always we seek to surmount the problems in our subconscious, and we generally do this by any means possible, sometimes creating the most fantastic illusions in order to substantiate our position. If we are unsuccessful, for example, we create a world of mean and capricious people whose sole purpose is to defeat our particular aims. If we are unloved, we relate by the hour the number of times we have done things for people and they have repaid us by ignoring us. If we are unhealthy, we recount at great length the tremendous drama of our struggle against the countless bugs that attack our weak and ineffectual organs. If we are poor, we think everybody else works less and makes more money. Decision determines growth. In every obstacle lies the key to another level of awareness. Until we find the key, we cannot grow, and our perception is ringed around with barriers. We are all on trial in life. Problems are posed to each of us, and we either face them or we don't. But if we face them, our growth is assured. Some people appear to conquer their problems easier than others, but this appearance sometimes is misleading. The enlightened man does not spread his troubles about. He keeps them to himself, preferring to create impressions of control and serenity. He has the inward realization that all people are equally troubled, that each has the same number of problems, perhaps on different levels, but equally important nonetheless. No man stands alone on the top of his mountain, no matter how small that mountain be. He is sustained and energized by a power beyond him, which in the end he must surrender to, which he must seek to express and effectuate upon the earth. What is going on in the universe stretches far beyond the imagination of the individual. We are in the grip of a power that knows exactly what is going on, that uses us as instruments to execute its will in the world. But The ennobling and heartening fact is this, that the individual may become anything he desires, may fit into any conception he is capable of conceiving, for no man is limited to what he appears to be, but has innate within him a quality that enables him to become anything he is capable of envisaging. He may reach out and touch the stars, for his creator can, and he is his creator, part and parcel, no different from at all, lacking only in understanding. Destiny and understanding. If a man opposes his will to events, he is opposing only his mental blocks. The will of the Supreme prevails, and man serves it, but man is a manifestation of the Supreme, and therefore can alter his destiny. He can change what he is by taking thought. He can change what he will be by determining the direction of his growth. The will of universal mind is a will toward enlightenment. The secret self has incarnated in each being and seeks through that particular manifestation to add to its self-knowledge. A man does not exist to satisfy his senses or his ego, but has been created and put upon the earth to find himself, to grow into awareness and self-knowledge. All the obstacles and events of life are for this purpose alone. It is not money we serve or pleasure or vanity, but an urge within us to grow, to become more than we are, to find our true selves, and to achieve dominion over the circumstances around us. Oedipus, in Sophocles' tragedy, strives with all the effort of his ego will to escape his doom, and in so doing takes the very steps that eventually bring it about. A man serves false gods when he serves the senses and the ego desires. Following these false masters eventually leads him into a blind alley where he either destroys himself or, in some other manner, courts tragedy. The secret self has placed the delusion of the individual ego in us. The delusion of ego self has been given in order that we might grow from the knowledge of a part to the knowledge of the whole, and in so doing aid the secret self in its ultimate ascension out of matter. The psychological or spiritual world. There is a power of extrasensory perception inherent in each of us, which we can call upon for enlightenment when opposition appears to have brought us to a dead end. The enormous psychic self, which our surface minds are tied to, permeates all things and all situations, so that we can penetrate the true nature of our opposition by a kind of mystic and occult process. Dr. Rhine's parapsychological laboratory at Duke University has proved the existence of the mind's extrasensory powers. Many thousands of documented cases of Edgar Cayce's psychic ability also have proved that a door occasionally opens in the opaque barrier between the individual and universal mind, and allows an inner perception of things beyond space and time and limitation. Such a man is Peter Herkos. Herkos is a modest Hollander who successfully predicted in 1959 that the Los Angeles Dodgers would win the National League pennant, when all authoritative predictions had them destined for the second division, after they had wound up next to last the year before. Herkos claims to be 87% accurate in his predictions and has the proof to substantiate his claims. "I have a gift of God," he says. He has been hired by police departments all over the world to track down escaped criminals, and his record has been astounding. He has been employed by business firms as a sort of security guard, checking the books simply by handling them, able to pinpoint any discrepancies through his feelings. The psychic ability of this amazing man has opened a door into the unknown, makes more apparent than ever the coming ascendancy of mind over matter, reveals that most fascinating conquest in the years ahead will be in mental realms and the study of consciousness. Dr. Haldane wrote in Science and Philosophy, "Nature just mocks at us when we attempt to divorce her from conscious perception. There is no such thing as physical world apart from consciousness. It is true that Berkeley and Hume showed by reasoning that has never been shaken that if the physical world were real, in the sense assumed by Newton, we could never come to know of its existence. What we interpret as physically determined is only what is imperfectly seen. It is thus only an imperfectly revealed world that we have taken for a material world. There is no escape from the conclusion that behind the appearances of a physical or biological world, we are in the presence of a psychological or spiritual world. When we give credence to the physical world, we give substantiality to an illusion. When we sweat and fume at obstacles, it is because we are unable to recognize that they are mental concepts and that they can only be altered in our own minds. All the great mystics have realized this mistaken focus of man's consciousness. Swedenborg stated that there are two beings within us, an inner being of true perception and action, and an external being of reaction. If, for lack of lucid apprehension of his inner being, a man allows bodily reaction to dominate his life, all his powers become absorbed in the use of external senses, and the inner being, the being of true perception and true action, gradually perishes. By subordinating the external being of reaction to an inner quality of light and serenity and divine purpose, a man's false duality is solidified into unity with his Creator, and he arrives at the pinnacle of his effectiveness as an individual. The secret of the Philosopher's Stone is that unity is the mark of the Absolute. When we fully realize this, we come to an understanding of the mystic bond that exists between ourselves and each obstacle we meet. That thing separate from ourselves, which appears to oppose us, is not separate from ourselves at all, but is permeated by the same spirit, is energized by the same principle that energizes us. And if we only are able to look within the depths of our own nature, we eventually are bound to see the truth of each obstacle, and when we do, it will disappear. It is amazing how much we can accomplish when we allow our subconscious minds to perform the work. It is equally amazing how difficult it is to do the simplest task when we go about it with our conscious minds. We have no trouble walking along a 2-foot path when we do not think about it, but put that 2-foot path across a 100-foot gorge and we begin to think about each step. Chances then that in crossing we will tumble off the bridge and fall into the ravine below. We have to learn to trust our subconscious to do things naturally at the behest of a principle that is greater than our surface mind. Reason is not to be trusted because it does not know enough about what it is dealing with. The complete knowledge about all things rests in universal mind, and this knowledge is within us. If we learn to call upon this intelligence to deal with each of our problems, we soon find that there is no such thing as an insurmountable obstacle. We have within us a resource that enables us to penetrate the block in our understanding that caused the obstacle in the first place. Have you examined your own life lately for the place where your understanding is blocked? It is easy to recognize. Do you find the same situation repeating itself with monotonous regularity? Do you sometimes feel that you are traveling around the perimeter of a circle over and over again, like a man lost in a snowstorm? Each of us eventually comes across his own tracks in life, for the law of living is that we must cover the same ground until our understanding concerning it is complete. Psychic awareness. People object to pain and suffering being instituted in a world that was made by a loving God, but the master intelligence that has created all, permeates all, and seeks through a countless differentiations of its own being for manifold expression of its infinite and eternal nature. Pain is the path by which it grows and has no other significance. Pain is related to pleasure, only as pleasure represents the absence of pain. Things that feel good make us static. Pleasure is the earmark of self-satisfaction. He whose aim in life is the seeking of pleasure has by that very attitude stunted his spiritual growth. The Supreme sees the goal along the path of the infinite and uses each of us to attain it. Our brains and bodies and hearts and minds and egos are instruments of a greater intelligence and will. And in that greater intelligence and will, we have our true identity, not in the surface mind and ego at all. Basic in the spiritual realization that comes to a man when he has achieved the proper psychic balance between ego and secret self is the knowledge that he and God are one. This claiming to be God is mystical and should not be confused with factual language. A man does not suddenly come to the realization that he is God with any kind of implication that he personally is in charge of the universe. The God that he speaks of is defined by the limited semantics of language. The God that he knows himself to be is a mystical life force that he allows to use him. Any attempt by himself to act upon the world from the position of God immediately defeats itself, for he cannot coerce things to a personal end without separating himself from the Supreme and acting in the ego, thereby losing the psychic position from which his knowledge first sprang. The world is not here to be used by people who attain psychic illumination. It is here as a field of action for the working out of the expression of the secret self. The man who is able to achieve illumination simply comes into position as a knower by subordinating his ego and surface self to the workings of a greater mind and being. He achieves effectiveness and serenity, but he does not change the world. The world is what it is because of what it must become, and it was what it once was because of what it had to be now. The egoistic and vain action of men carries with it a sense of personal responsibility and impending disaster. There are wars and rumors of wars. There are economic crises and political crises. There are plagues and diseases and crimes. Men run about, hurry with this and that, convinced that disaster can be staved off only by their individual and heroic efforts. If there is any sense or meaning to life at all, no philosophy could be farther from the truth. The intelligence that reveals itself in the design of a snowflake, in the photosynthesis of green and growing things, in the complex biochemistry of living protoplasm, is in charge of the world and of life, and destiny and purpose can be left in its sure hands. It is not our position to rant and rail against fate and circumstance, and to save the world from disaster. It is ours to understand, to attempt to penetrate the meanings of existence, so that we can grow into higher levels of consciousness, and thereby become better instruments for the manifestation of the secret self. If we take this very great and exciting step, we fulfill the primary commandment of life. Creativeness becomes the guiding principle of the enlightened life. The man who places himself in the hands of the Supreme soon realizes that the work to be done through him will be unique because he is a unique instrument. He will not attack his tasks. He will listen and allow the work to be done. If he lets the ego control or originate, he defeats his purpose, for he cannot serve two masters. The creative urge prods so deeply at some people that they must abandon all to serve it, and in the serving of it, they find spiritual enlightenment. They go each day to the font of selfhood, rededicate themselves as instruments, and let universal mind work through them. Creative work is a prayer. Harry worked as a bank clerk, and in his late 20s was aware of a gnawing dissatisfaction with life. He thought it was because he wasn't getting ahead, and he certainly felt that he had little talent for his job. Day after day he arose at the same hour, fixed his breakfast in his small apartment, took the bus to work, sat at a small desk behind a low iron railing, ate his lunch at the same restaurant, returned home at night to an evening of reading before going to bed. The monotony of this existence, its lack of creativity, pulled on him. He became antisocial, was irritable and resentful to those about him. Returning home from work one day, he sprinted after a departing bus, slipped, fell under the wheels. Both legs were crushed and had to be amputated. When Harry returned to full consciousness after weeks of hovering near death and learned how the world had tumbled about his shoulders, he exhibited a strange reaction. Instead of being overcome by despair, he actually seemed happy. When asked about it, he replied, "I don't really know why, but for some reason, I feel that now I can really be myself. I've lost part of my physical body, but gained something else, I think." After Harry was discharged from the hospital, he took a cottage at the beach where he lived on a small income derived from insurance. He began to write. He sat all day in a chair propped up before a typewriter and turned out reams of copies. After a while, some of it was published. Within 3 years, he was comfortably augmenting his income. Even more marked than his success as a writer was his transformation as an individual. He was radiant, his clear eyes focused far away as he spoke of what his creativeness meant to him. "It's religious," he said, "like praying, I think. It's like being visited each day by a supreme mind that works through you because it needs you to do particular work. I sit here all day in my little house, apparently all alone, but I must tell you that I feel more needed now than I ever have felt before in my life." He gestured towards the manuscript scattered around the room. "All this has been done through me. It doesn't matter whether people think it's great or mediocre or even poor. It has been done by a power greater than I, and this power works through me." The joy on Harry's face was testimony to the tremendous spiritual transformation that had taken place within him. "I lost everything," he continued, "my job, my health, my legs. But in losing them, I found something of far greater importance. I learned that material things, even limbs of the body, are unimportant. The main thing in life is that a man should awaken to his true self and serve that self all his hours. This I have been privileged to do." He laughed then and showed his humour was still with him, but I don't recommend that you cut off your legs to do it. Indomitableness. A man who refuses to quit, who keeps on trying in the face of defeat, who does his best against superior forces, and loosens within us a sympathetic cord that is tied deep to subconscious racial memories. Greater than courage is tenacity, the willingness to stick in there and keep trying. By this patient and determined positioning of ourselves in life, barred doors eventually open and stone walls dissolve. A drop of water persistently applied wears away granite. Tender flowers lift their petals to the sun, through solid concrete. Nothing resists persistent effort, and tenacity is the sine qua non of achievement. We must not let circumstances influence our thinking. The appearance of obstacles must not cause us to lose heart. We must have faith in our basic position, know that we are capable of doing anything and being anything we can visualize. The same animating presence is within us all as is within every obstacle, and we need only understand our true relationship with each in order to perform effectively. Getting the job done is not life's primary aim. Each task is only a test of human aspiration and self-knowledge. Raising human consciousness to constantly higher levels is the primary purpose of nature. Material ends are secondary, side effects rather than goals. It is not so important to succeed in the eyes of the world as it is to attempt something bigger and greater than we have ever done. From this test, expanded consciousness comes, no matter the physical fate of the venture. The conquest of self. Opposition is the testing ground where life evolves constantly higher levels of awareness. In this arena, the master spirit holds court, bound on a meeting with the completely evolved man. Evolution bends us and needs us, tries us and sometimes breaks us. We serve a greater intelligence than we are consciously aware of. We are growing toward an eventual oneness with that intelligence, and if the path be marked by pain and trial, these are only urgings toward greater understanding and awareness. The conquest of each obstacle is a conquest of self. Guiding principles. Let no obstacle dismay you. It has been put in your path for the purpose of your growth. Do not attack it headlong, but do not turn away from it. It is but a reflection of your lack of understanding. Do not cease in your calm and steady effort, and do not despair. Keep firm your resolve. Keep clear the image of your mind. Keep faith in the power that sustains you. Eventually, you will find yourself carried to a higher level of understanding, and the obstacle will disappear. Above all things, remember that opposition is a time of growth, that our effectiveness as individuals is in direct relation to the number of obstacles we have faced and surmounted in life.